Let me encourage y'all with something. Technology is great, but don't let the tech replace the tangible. There's something about just having the tangible copy of God's Word that you can keep in your hands, that you can run through with your fingers, that you can take a pen or a marker and highlight or scribble in the notes that God impresses upon your heart as you study it. And listen, if you don't have a Bible to call your own tonight, don't leave this place without letting me know. I'll get you one. Everybody in this place should have access to God's Word. You should be able to have a Bible to take home with you. So if you're here tonight and you don't have a Bible and you would love to have one to call your own, please come find me afterwards. I would love to give you a tangible copy of God's Word. Whatever means you have of accessing the Word with you tonight, find your way over to John chapter 4. And once you get there, I need you to mark that spot. And then I need you to put it in reverse and back all the way up to Genesis chapter 12. We're going to mix a little bit of the old with the new tonight. So first place, John chapter 4. Once you get there, mark that spot, throw it in reverse, go all the way back to the front, Genesis chapter 12. That's where I'm going to start out tonight with the word that I believe God has impressed upon my heart to lay in front of us as an assignment from Him. In Genesis chapter 12, we find the call of a man named Abram, who God would later rename to be somebody that we know more familiarly as Abraham. And so that's what we encounter here in Genesis chapter 12. God is going to come to Abraham and He's going to tell him, Abraham, I want you to pick up your entire family and I want you to move from this place that you've known as home your entire life. And I want you to go somewhere that I'm going to show you on the way as you travel. So as we're going to pick up Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 1, God's word says this. Now the Lord said to Abram, go, everybody say go. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their possessions that they had gathered and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negeb. Now we're going back to John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, we find an interesting account of a man who we only know as an official who has approached Jesus on behalf of his sick and dying son. So this man, he has a son, and he's fallen ill, and nothing seems to help. No medicine, no doctors have been able to help his situation. And so he goes to Jesus, hoping that he can do what nobody else can do and heal his son, who otherwise is going to die in the following moments. So in John chapter 4, starting in verse 46, we encounter Jesus doing something amazing for this official and his son. It says, so he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. The official said to him, sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, go. Everybody say, go. Your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better. And they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. The father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son will live. And he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. I want to talk tonight about when go isn't much to go on. We've just seen two different stories separated by a couple of thousand years in their occurrence, but have remarkably similar storylines. In Genesis, Abraham received a call from God. In John, the official needed a work of God. But in both instances, all that these men got was a word spoken by God. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred." Jesus said to the official as he came to him on behalf of his son, "Go, your son will live." And it's interesting to me because as I studied these passages, I began to realize that whether it's a received call from God or a needed work of God in our lives, most of the time as we call out to Him, all we get is just a word back. Something that God speaks to us or impresses upon us. There's oftentimes no master plan. There's no blueprint. There's no step-by-step process. There's no 5-year plan that He lays out for us. We can't see in the moment what the end result is going to be or how things are going to exactly work out. It's just a word that He speaks to us. And it's what we do with that word that He speaks that's important. I believe there's a lot of us here tonight that have asked God to do a specific work in your life in some way or somehow. Or maybe you feel like He's placed a specific calling upon your life in some way, prompting you to take some sort of action, but all He gave you was a word to go on. Maybe just like these men, it was just a simple go. Maybe it's a trust me. Maybe it's a call to obedience. Maybe it was a call for you to come to Him in salvation. Maybe it's a call for you to let go of something that you've held on to a very long time and you're not sure what to do or where to go from this moment. You know what you need to do, but you're apprehensive about going through with it. You'd probably feel a little bit better if God maybe gave you just a little something more than a few words to go on. Like I need some kind of sign to accompany with that. I need some kind of further affirmation or confirmation, or maybe if He just give you a glimpse of what was to come down the road, it'd make it a little bit easier for you to move in the thing that you feel like He's calling you to move towards. Abraham and this official, they didn't get much from God other than a few words, but it was enough to go on. You may have only gotten just a few words from something that He's placed specifically upon your life, and it may not mean much, but it's enough to go on. And I want to show you how, when all He gives you is a word, you have to let faith push you forward. Both Abraham and this official only got a few words spoken to them from God. Remember what God said to Abraham as He showed up and He placed a specific call upon his life. He says, "Abraham, I want you to go from your country. I want you to go from your kindred, your father's house, and I'm going to make of you a great nation. I'm going to take you to a land that I will show you." In the same instance, when the official came to Jesus and implored Him to do something on behalf of his ill son, all Jesus said back to him was, "Go, your son will live." And even though it wasn't much to go on, both of these men, we see in their instances, let faith push them forward. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 4, we see that God appears to Abraham and He says, "Go from this place." Genesis 12:4 shows us that Abraham did exactly just that. So Abram went as the Lord told him. It was just that simple. God shows up and He says, "Go." Abraham's like, "Okay, I guess I'll go." Like, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know what you're going to show me, but I believe that you will. I don't know how you're going to make of me a great nation. My wife can't even have kids, but because you've given me a word to go on, that's enough, and we'll just go. We'll see what happens. I'm going to let faith push me forward. In the same way, when Jesus spoke to this official, He said, "Go, your son will live." In that same chapter in verse 50, it says that the man believed the word Jesus spoke to him, and he went on his way. So in both of these instances, God speaks a word to these men to go, and we see both of them do just that. Abraham leaves his home behind. He lets faith push him into something that he couldn't even fathom. In the same way, when this man asked Jesus to do something on behalf of his son, Jesus says, "Go, your son will live." He turns around and heads back home, not sure probably what exactly was going to take place, but he had the faith that just perhaps Jesus might do what He said He would do. That's what faith does. It pushes us forward even when we don't have much to move forward on. Something I want you to notice is that Abraham was leaving home, but the official was returning home. Listen, when you're following God, it doesn't matter if you're leaving or returning. Both require faith. Abraham was going to a place of promise. The official was returning to a place of pain. Listen, we want to think about following the call of God upon our lives, and we always want to frame that up with the mentality that it's leading us onward to something else new in our future. And yes, that is true a good bit of the time. But God's leadings in our life don't always just take us into new places. Sometimes His leadings do take us into a new future, but sometimes He takes us back to things in the past. What you need to see is that if God tells you to go, there's benefits to both. So whether He's leading you into a place that's a new future for you or taking you to somewhere that you've already been, something that's in your past, there's benefits to His directions and His guidings back into both of those places. Abraham, as he went, would experience blessing. The official, as he went, would experience healing. Tell somebody beside you, there's benefits to both. There's benefits to both. We always think, God, lead me into somewhere new, lead me into a new place of blessing, but sometimes He says, I need to take you back into your past because there's some healing that needs to be done there so you can experience the greater blessing of the future. Abraham got to go in a blessing. This man, I'm sure, didn't want to go back to his house, not sure whether or not his son was going to be healed, but he went, and that's exactly what he would get to experience. But listen, that might not have happened if both of them hadn't have let faith push them forward. Go wasn't much to go on, but they went regardless. Here, I want to show you something. God already had the miracle in place, but there's something to this I want to highlight for you. God already has the miracle in place for both Abraham and this official. He's already got it planned out for this blessing to be given to Abraham. He's already got healing in store for this official's son. So the miracle is in place. But there are some miracles that only get activated by movement. God says, I'll bless you, Abraham, in a new land, but you've got to leave this one. You've got to move from this place to receive the new place that I have in store for you. In the same sense with this son, Jesus says your son will live, but you've got to go back to the house. There are some things in our lives that I believe God truly has prepared and set apart for us. Amazing, wonderful, miraculous blessings that are only going to be activated in our lives and seen to fruition if we move in faith towards the things that He has told us He is going to do. I think for some of you here tonight, maybe you've asked God to do a work in your life or in your friends' lives or in your family members' lives. For others, I think you felt God place a call on your life, whether it be to ministry or to missions, a career or a career change or to salvation or to follow in believers' baptism. And even if you don't currently have much to go on, let faith continue to push you forward in seeking those things out. Even though it's not much to go on, you can let your faith push you forward during those times. The other truth of this that I want you to see is when you don't have much to go on, you've got to be careful that you don't let comfort cause you to cling. Both of these men had to move past what was comfortable for them and to them. Abraham was leaving behind the comfort of all that he had known for 75 years. God's word outlines that perfectly for us. It said Abraham was going to leave the place of Haran where he had lived for 75 years. That's a long time to live in one place. I can't even begin to imagine what it felt like for Abraham to hear the news that after 75 years of living in one place, he was going to have to pack up all those things in his family and move somewhere that God said, I'll show you later. 75 years. This guy knew every single back road. He knew every hole-in-the-wall restaurant that had the good stuff. He knew everybody in town. Abraham was that guy that went into the gas station that morning and had coffee with all those other men and could call everybody by name as they came into the store. Like, this was Abraham's hometown. This is where he had always been. He's like, man, that's my piece of dirt right over there. My entire family has farmed that for generations and generations and generations. I've raised my family here. I've got deep roots in this place. I can't imagine what it was like for him to think about packing up and leaving all that behind. In the same sense, the official, when Jesus told him to go back home, he had to leave behind the comfort of Jesus' presence. I think this guy would have probably felt a little better if Jesus would have started walking towards his house with him. I mean, just imagine you go to Christ You've heard the reports of how he can do things that nobody else can do. And you're like, I'm going to go to him because perhaps he can help my son when nobody else can. And you find Jesus, and you explain the whole situation. Jesus, man, my son's really sick. Like, he's going to die if you don't do something. And he's like, okay, go back home. Your son's going to be fine. And you're like, so that's like it? That's all we get? Like, dude, like, no offense. Like, Jesus, no offense. But, like, I've heard the stories, man, like when you be healing people, like you're placing hands on them. You're like doing weird stuff and spitting on dirt and rubbing it on the eyes and stuff like that. Like, can I get some dirt spitting or something? Like, maybe give me some mud you mix up to take it back home with me. Are you sure you don't want to come over to the house for a little bit? Like it's this way. It's really not that far. Like, it's just a couple hundred yards down the street. You just right over here. Like, I think he would have felt a lot better had Jesus' physical presence accompanied him back home. But both of them let go of what was most comfortable to them. Let me tell y'all one thing that God has taught me in the past and in my present. It's that comfort can cause clinging. We get comfortable and we start to cling because it's what we know. It's what we're familiar with. How many of you get a little bit weird about change? And this is the young age of your life, when change is like more readily accepted. Like, we look at older people, we look like somebody that's 70, 80 years old, and we're like, obviously they're not going to be about change. Like, especially in the church world, we get on to the older people in our church, like, oh, they're so anti-change. But even now, some of y'all can't even come in here and sit in a different seat each week. We get weird about change. We get weird about our routines being disrupted. We get weird about being in places that we're not comfortable with, and that's what comfort does at times. It can cause us to be clingy because it's what we know. It feels safe. We're comfortable there. It's familiar to us. Listen, it talks about how Abraham's moving after 75 years. Me and my wife are in the process of moving out of our house right now. We've been there for 11 years. 11 years is it. That's a small number in comparison to 75 years. Let me tell you, you can accumulate a lot of junk in 11 years. Here's what I found. After 11 years of living in that place, we've been going through all of our stuff. We're trying to get it packed up in the bins. We're getting rid of some things that we need to be getting rid of. What I have found out in our clinging, or in our cleaning, is that it has revealed our clinginess. We got stuff in that house still that ain't seen the light of day in probably 8 or 9 years. And you pull it out of the box, and I was laughing the other day because Ashley found like her old cheer uniform from high school. You pull those things out of the box. Like, I got my own things too. Like, I've got some old high school jerseys and stuff like that, and we'll look at them and we're like, why do we even still have these things? And like, I know there's some sentimental value to some of it, like, and I get you want to keep those things, but like, there's some of those things I look at and I'm like, we don't need any of this stuff. And she's getting in trouble a little bit maybe. We've worked through a lot about letting go of some things, haven't we, babe? It's not easy to do. Some of us are more clingy than others. I can throw away just about anything. My wife, not so much. And so there are some things that we pull out, and she's like, I think I'm going to keep this. I'm like, you ain't even seen, you didn't even know it was in there. It's been in the attic for 7.5 years, like. And now all of a sudden we see it, and we want to hold on to it. I don't want to get rid of that. Like, I might use that one day. You might use it. You didn't even know you still had it. We cling to things that have a level of comfort for us. And I know what you might be thinking. Like, maybe this makes it a little bit uneasy because you're like, now, Trey, calm down a little bit, dude. Like, my Bible tells me that my God is the God of all comfort. That's what I see. Like, I can take you to 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and show you even a little like subtitle heading in my Bible says God of all comfort. So what you going to do about that? Why are you busting on comfort like that? He's the God of all comfort. Yes, he is, but listen to me. Comfortable people don't need comforting. I think some of us would do some good maybe to realize that Satan twists the principle of comfort in our minds to a wrong understanding. Because listen to me. He would rather you stay in comfort than move into blessing. He'd rather you learn to be comfortable with your pain than move and receive healing. He would have been much more satisfied for Abraham to cling to the comfort of something that he had known for 75 years of his life and never move in response to God's call, which would activate the miracle of God's blessing. In the same sense, he would have much rather that official just stay with Jesus and maybe not trust that his word was sufficient and enough to heal his son, instead of moving back towards his house where his sick son was, therefore by faith activating the miracle that God had already prepared for his household to receive. Be careful about comfort, that it doesn't lead you into a place of becoming stagnant and therefore hindering some really amazing things that God has prepared to pour out into your life. It may be just a word that God spoke, but he never speaks without purpose. He speaks a word because he's set in motion a work. Don't miss out on blessing. Don't miss out on healing. Don't miss out on miracles because all you've gotten is a word from God and you don't see it as enough to make you let go of your comfort. He's worth sacrificing the things that make us comfortable. I would much rather enter into a place of discomfort and see God do what I never could have asked or imagined versus stay in my place of comfort and never by faith see the might of his hand fully at work in my life. Don't let comfort cause you to cling to the things that God wants to move you away from and into better places. There's one other thing to show you in the midst of this. These guys, all they really got was a go. It wasn't much to go on. In the same way, a lot of times God speaks something into our lives and it's not much. But what they do, they let faith push them forward. They didn't cling on to their comforts. And there's a really encouraging part to this, and it's the fact that as they moved forward, as they let go of the things that comforted them the most, they found that there's assurance that comes through an appearance. So some really cool connecting dots as we bring this thing to a close tonight. As Abraham was faithfully moving from what he had always known to where he had never been, God reappeared and reassured him. So let's go back into Genesis chapter 12. I want to show you this in the text in verse 5. So Abraham's packed up his family and all of his things, and he's moving towards the place of promise that God said he would lead him to. And you have to imagine there's probably some uncertainty there. There's probably some apprehension. There's probably some wondering of man, I don't know if this was the right move or not. Like, I'm not sure if it's going to pan out. Like, I'm sure there's probably some questioning of Abraham's family. It's like, dude, do you know what you're doing? Like, come on, where are we going? He's like, I don't know. God just said he's going to make it known. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. We're just going to keep heading this direction and trust that he's going to make his will known. Like, I'm sure there was some apprehension. I'm sure even in Abraham's mind, he's kind of like, man, I don't know if this was the move or not. But look at what happens. In verse 5, it says that he took Sarai's wife and Lot his brother and all the possession that they had gathered and the people that they had acquired in Haran. They set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land, the place at Shechem, to the Oak of Moreh. And at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. And verse 7 is key. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. As Abraham was faithfully moving from what he had always known to where he had never been, God reappears and he reassures him. The same was true in the official's life. As he faithfully moved back towards his home, his servants appeared and give him some news of something that's taken place while he's been gone. So we go back into the text, John chapter 4. In verse 51, he speaks with Jesus. Jesus says, go, I'm telling you, your son's going to live. And he's headed back to his house. Now, once again, there's probably some apprehension. There's probably some uncertainty. There may have been a level of doubt of man, what am I going to find when I get there? Like, I know Jesus said that. I know he's full of power and full of authority, but can he really save my son by just speaking a word? I would have felt a little bit better if maybe he'd have come over to the house, but he's Christ, and I'm not. And perhaps, just maybe, he can do the impossible. And as he's headed back to his house, I can imagine all these thoughts are swimming through his mind. What am I going to find when I get there? Verse 51 says, as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. And so he asked him the hour when he began to get better. And I said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left. And the father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son will live. And he himself believed in all of his household. What I'm trying to tell you is that God has a way of bringing you assurance during the assignment. He don't just leave you hanging high and dry. If you got the faith that will push you forward on the word that he gave you to go on, he will bring you some assurance at some point in time during that assignment, because it's always during the in-between that it gets the most intense, right? It's always that time between when the word was spoken and when it becomes fulfilled. It's always that time when you're in between your old home and the new one. It's that time when you're in between the healer and the healing. It's during the in-between that doubt and uncertainty can creep in. But that's when God, out of his goodness and his faithfulness, will send an assurance through an appearance. It may come in the simplest of ways. It could be a subtle encouragement that somebody just happened to send on a random Monday through a text message. Maybe it's the opportunity that you get to see a life truly be impacted, one that you've been praying for so long, and all of a sudden there's a little bit of a breakthrough. They reach out and they say, man, I'm seeking and I'm searching and I don't fully understand it, but I want you to know, like, I really feel like God may be doing something fresh in my life. Maybe it comes through an opportunity to see some progress being made in your own life. A specific temptation or a struggle that you've been fighting for so long and you feel like there's no victory there, and then all of a sudden you get a little one. And you find out this thing really can't happen. I can't be victorious through the Spirit of God. His power really is at work in and through my life. Like I didn't think I could handle this. Like I didn't think that I could step into this calling that he's given me. I didn't think there was any way that it could be provided for. But then somebody shows up, something comes through the mail, a piece of change ends up in your hand somehow, and you realize that God's taking care of it. He really is faithful to provide and to sustain if you'll just follow him in it. Listen, you may not have much to go on, but if you'll just go, I can assure you, his assurance will find you along the way. When I was wrestling with the call to ministry on my own personal life, man, I was so worked up over that because I didn't know if it truly was what God was calling me to or not. And the last thing that I wanted to do was step into something like this and it not truly be the will of God on my life. The last thing I want to do is to step into this out of my own fleshly reasons or desires or whatever. And so I just became infatuated with seeking the voice of God and seeking his confirmation in my life. And I kind of got into a hang-up point where I wasn't sure. Like I'd made it so far and I'd seen some things, and God, I felt like I'd spoken some things, and I was just kind of right there on the edge. I was like, God, I don't, maybe, but maybe not. So I reached out to a buddy that had been through that, and he was serving in ministry and had gone through that whole process. And I said, man, can we get breakfast one day? Because I just want to pick your brain. I want to hear how God confirmed this in your life. And so I meet him at some random breakfast joint in Moulton, Alabama. It's a little nothing town. You'll pass through it and not even realize it. You leave this, you hit 157, you go towards Coleman, you pass right through Moulton, never know it. Unless you get pulled over. 45 through there, and you better do it. So we go and we have breakfast. I'm sitting there and I'm telling him these things, and we're having this conversation. And I'm hoping God, I'm like, God, send me something through this conversation. Send me something through this meeting that's just going to drive the nail of confirmation down for me. And we're sitting there talking, and there's this older couple sitting in the back of the room. It's breakfast time. It's a pretty busy restaurant. It's noisy. There's no way. I can't hear anything these guys saying. It's him and his wife sitting back there. They're on the other side of the room. And he gets up, and he walks by our table, and he walks past us. He gets a couple of steps past, and he stops, and he backs up. And he turns, and he says, I'm not real sure what the conversation is that's being had at this table, but I feel like I need to tell you something. He points at me. He says, I served as a pastor for 40 years. And I felt impressed to tell you that God is pleased by what you're seeking after here this morning. Don't be afraid to go into it. Listen, I'm not a storyteller. I don't blow smoke. I don't just make up stuff for the sake of it. Sounds good to fit into a sermon. Hand on the Bible, God's assurance spoke that plainly into my assignment that day. And I tell you that to hopefully be an encouragement to you that if you will faithfully push forward. I knew God had given me just a word. When I felt this calling upon my life into this, I was sitting in a factory right down the road at about 2:30 in the morning on a forklift trying not to fall asleep. And I'm praying, I'm seeking God's will for my life. I'm like, God, what do you want? And that night, the only thing I heard whisper into my heart was the word ministry. That was it. Nothing else. And so I began to push into that. And wouldn't you know it, ran smack into the faithfulness of God, just looking to be obedient. What I felt like he had given me as a go. Was it much to go on? Nope. But was it enough? Yep. Let faith push you forward. What word has God given you that you need to go on tonight? I guess that's my question as we finish up. Is it a go? Is it a serve? Is it obey? Is it follow? Is it come to me in submission and faith for salvation? What's God impressed upon your heart, if anything? If so, are you moving on it? And one last thing, too. You know, even after that, you think like that's all. That was good enough. That was more than enough. But even after that, I sought out a couple of more affirmations. And you know what I realized in that? I learned a valuable lesson in that as well. Is that there comes a point in time where you have to stop trying to find people's affirmation when you've already been given God's known confirmation. There comes a point in time, men and women, where there's no more coffee dates needed. There's no more lunches that you need to have, no more breakfast, no more text message, no more conference calls, no more affirmations from people. Just move on what you know God has confirmed in your life. And go, even if it's not much.